Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Riki Ellison. I'm the founder and chairman of the Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance. I am here in my hometown, Tucson, Arizona. I've had a great physics teacher at public school at Amphitheater High School that sort of led me in the love of what we're talking about today. It's been a great visit here. I've had the opportunity to go to the border at NACO, Arizona. And the activity between NACO and Douglas is some of the biggest in our in drone warfare that on the other side of the border the cartels are doing. The fence is up, obviously, but the fence doesn't stop drones coming across. Just a fascinating history. Little NACO was the first place that a foreign country bombarded us. We were bombarded by Mexico in 1929 with a biplane there, which is just wow. And then we got to give a little love to the Buffalo Soldiers, because the Buffalo Soldier Corps came in and camped at NACO from then to before World War II began. So it's memorable, and it's it's hard to say it, but it's somewhat like back in the 1890s, where Tombstone and Wyatt Earp and the lack of law and order on the border, and we're obviously putting striker groups now. We're getting this thing organized. The cavalry is here to stop that. So it's good to see the attention focused on the air threat coming across our border is being approached. This is our 69th congressional virtual. We're honored to have a great group of experts coming from, we got Mark in Taiwan, JD's in Colorado, Shotgun Tom Brownie's in DC, and Dan's in Sweet Home, Alabama. So it's going to be a good discussion that we're going forward on. Our title is the Gold Rush, and we know we're less than 25 days out from the report that's due by the executive order that's going. And we want to just look at a couple of things, especially the timeline. I know this president, I think we all know this president administration want a deliverable in 18 months now. So that seems to be pretty clear and apparent that what's doable, what's really doable in 18 months, and what's not doable in 18 months. And there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of, interesting but way over the top capabilities being discussed from thousands of kinetic interceptors up in space for boost space missile defense that are $50-60 billion. I mean, is that realistic on that? So I think it's important that we just flush out the capabilities that we can produce and deploy in 18 months for the defense of the country, and then build off of that to where we have to go on that. So that's the discussion today. It's a good one. We look forward to the thoughts of our experts. So I'm going to start off with JD Gainey. And he, one of the key guys that spearheaded the Guam effort for missile defense way back in 2018. He was the former aide to the COCOM commander, INDOPACOM commander and director of the CAG, deputy IMD chief. So he's pretty qualified, real qualified on the Guam position, whether we're going to be doing something like that or not, and going forward on that. So I'd like to start off with JD. JD, welcome. It's all yours.
Thanks, Riki. Aloha, everybody. It's a pleasure being here. The topic of today is Gold Rush, right? And different ways we can approach it with, well, how much money is going to be invested, how much money is expected to be spent, what time, how big is this thing actually going to be? So what I wanted to do is kind of start off with a little context based on the approach of offering solutions to the president here in 25 days. But the attempt here is to call balls or strikes, and the biggest takeaways are, if you want it right, you're not going to get it right now based on the way that the missile defense enterprise is set up. If you want it bad, you're going to get it bad. And I just start off with 2023 report from GAO talking about missile defense. And it talks about how broken just the sustainment tailpiece is with respect to our missile defense enterprise. And I would offer, taking a look at that report, the biggest recommendation says, this absent of comprehensive guidance to include responsible oversight entities in processing for prioritization and assessing sustainment challenges. The reason why I bring up sustainment is without understanding the tail end of what entity is going to pick this up and run with it for tens of years, this is going to be a hard conversation. It actually opens the door for industry to come up and dust off old plans. It allows the missile defense enterprise to talk about priorities and requirements that have essentially fallen beneath the cut line over the past few years as well. So the lack of a comprehensive oversight effort to be able to understand how this money is going to be spent and the sustained piece of it is a problem that has not been solved. So therefore, the product and the approach that's being made right now, it's not going to have a holistic approach and effort. There's some things when we start talking about whatever sustaining this is, there's some functions or requirements that are steadfast, and I think a lot of people are overlooking. Let's take a look at Space Force and Spacecom as an example. They're responsible for 80% of the kill chain already, for the find, fix, track piece of it. The only thing that they don't have responsibility for is the intercept and the engagement piece of it. So, interceptors are, and the consummation piece is the most expensive piece thus far from missile defense enterprise. But between those two entities, you're talking about a core foundation of who should be the one leading this effort. But when we talk about the expense of this thing, and when we put it in front of our Missile Defense Enterprise Board, which is chaired by the Undersecretary of R&D with MDAA as the executive secretary, with all the services and all the other MDAA missile defense communities as equal partners and recommendations for capability attainment or policy determination. And so there's a piece to this where a fair share and representation of what's important has been, I'd say, watered down to a collective bargaining agreement. The bureaucracy in place be able to provide a prioritized list of this is the stuff that's important, this is where we need to go and pursue things, have came down to what service or what equities need to be maintained. So we've seen fallout from the Guam defense system. Some services not even want to touch it because they see a bill associated with it. And you have some services take a look at this and go, hey, this is an opportunity to modernize some capabilities that I would not traditionally have funding for. So we talk about safeguarding equities. You got a lot of people with different motivations to use this Golden Dome effort to be able to push those equities forward and keep them secure. I just want to kind of put out some thoughts when it comes to how to approach this this problem set. I heard this saying on PBR about 7-8 years ago. I can't remember who said it, but they started with expertise without innovation is predictable. Innovation without expertise is amateurism. However, expertise with innovation, that's where the magic happens. Because there's so many equities at place across the services. There's so many motivators from industry to governance to command and control. I don't think that missile defense enterprise community has the opportunity to focus on innovation with expertise to support it. We're 25 days away from this report coming out. As Riki said, all intents and purposes, it's going to be a regurgitation of what we can expect. Let's take what we have right now and just buy more of it. All right. So, hey, Raytheon, can you increase your SM6 productivity by X amount? Hey, Lockheed, can you increase your PAC-3 productivity by X amount? Same thing for TP2s. Same thing for LRDRs. Really, it's predictable that a ton of money with as-is capability is going to be offered as a solution set. So the rest of the panelists will talk about it. Shotgun has been in a very unique position as by by being the head chief technology officer over the past few years, where innovation actually has become part of realistic and achievable capability delivery to the warfighters. So, taking a look at missile defense design holistically, based on not just capability pursuit, innovative capability pursuits, but the way we're changing our acquisition protocols for software pathfinders that are getting real high-end content to the warfighter within weeks, to establishing a need and requirement justifying to become a program of record within tens of days, 60 days in some cases. So the thing is there's a lot of old graybeards out there that are part of industry, that are part of consulting agencies, that just don't understand how you can bring in novel concepts, especially here, me being in Denver, in the mecca of space innovation area. There's a lot of techniques from the commercial side and what space is using to be able to enhance and accelerate capability delivery out here. So until we start opening our aperture to accept that type of innovation exploration into our kit, we're kind of be stuck with the old as is, which is expensive and is predictable and doesn't give us an opportunity to really accelerate the capabilities we provide. Riki, you're on mute.
I said, thanks, JD. From your perspective, we're going down this path as you observed. How do we change that? Does this what's going to happen that needs to be changed within 25 days to get the singularity, what you have stated, to do this? Or will this take a rejection from the president to restart this whole process again? Is that just where are your thoughts on that aspect of it?
Yeah, there are two things, Riki. Chairman Mullen back in the day had a problem with Iran. He went out to the best of the best from the intelligence community, warfighting capability, political advisement capabilities, and he created what was termed as a strategic focus group. It was a group of very specialized individuals going after a problem set that took 30 days to 60 days or 90 days to come up with a solution. I would offer this is an opportunity here for the entity that's responsible for technical integration for missile defense, the MDAA, to go out and pull in all facets of the government.
You don't think they've done that? You don't think they've done that?
No, not at all. If they did, everything that we've been seeing about possible solutions wouldn't be on the table. The fact that edge-based compute and unmanned platform surveillance and even unmanned weapons delivery system is not part of the discussion shows me that we're not using all of our high-end capabilities to bear.
Thanks for your thoughts. Well, okay, we're going to go back to my favorite Army general, and I think he is the smartest Army general we've ever had on missile defense. I mean, he is legit, and the former commander of the Army Space Missile Defense Command, former retired Lieutenant General Dan Karbler. Dan?
Thanks, Riki. You probably should go meet some more Army generals than to go eat, because there's plenty more smarter than I am. Thanks for the intro. And thanks for having me on. So try not to rehash what we talked about a few weeks ago, but as I take a look at kind of the metamorphosis of Iron Dome for America, now Golden Dome for America, what's starting to crystallize in my mind a little bit are maybe three areas that we have to look at, and they all intersect, but starting at the top and they call it kind of the P3. So prioritize, position, and posture. So if we start at prioritizing, the department, and frankly, the whole of government in the nation, needs to look at how important is this? How important is Golden Dome for America? Remember, Secretary Mattis used to say, America can afford survival. So prioritize for funding has got to come in there. Yes, it's super expensive. This business is super expensive. Sensors, interceptors, the scale, the capacity that we need to be able to defend this huge country, its coastline, Guam, Alaska, et cetera, Hawaii. It is going to be expensive. There's no doubt about it. So we've got to, as a nation, come to grips with how much is that it's going to be expensive, and then make it our top priority. We've got to look at our policies that are out there, and we've got to make sure that from the government, from the interagency, National Security Council, the Department of Defense, we're establishing policies out there. And frankly, we should probably start with a review and a rewrite of the MDR to really address Golden Dome for America. But let's get the policies in place then that will allow this capability to take place. And not just policies on the active defense piece of this, which incorporates everything from space down to counter UAV, but what policies are we going to have to get after left of launch? Remember, in the executive order, left of launch is called out there. Right now, all we really hear about is a lot of discussion about, how are we going to take out ICBMs and cruise missiles, et cetera. Well, there's a whole left of launch portion of this that's not being addressed. And we need policy to go out there and kind of enable us, embolden our geographic combat commanders or some of our functional combat commanders like SOCOM to go take a look at what is left of launch, what is the left of launch piece of this. So policy is going to be that. Along with policies, we probably should take a look at service roles and missions. We had roles and missions looks, many years ago, 20 years ago or so. Maybe it's time to dust off some roles and missions discussions. And as we look at, hey, who's going to be the lead sled dog? We kind of sort of touched on it a little bit. We talked about cruise missile defense for the homeland. We gave that to the Air Force, but that kind of fell flat. Didn't really have a lot of support because the priority wasn't there. So because the priority wasn't there, Air Force couldn't really run with it like they wanted to. Probably need to look at roles and missions. A great example you could tee up is Aegis Ashore, right? We fought about Aegis Ashore, the Navy, the Army, we fought at it. And the Army said, nope. And the Navy said, well, it should be an Army mission, but we're not going to give you any TOA. We're not going to give you any force structure to do it. And the Army said, I can't afford to do it. So, I mean, if we want to, if the Army wants to take it on, if the Navy wants to give Aegis Ashore as part of Epic 1 or 2 for Golden Dome for America, well, we'll just defund Aegis BMD. How about that? And then we'll just give all that capability to the Army and then let the Army run with it. I say that a little facetiously, but those are the kind of trades that happen in the roles and missions discussion among the services. If you're truly going to be serious about designating a service to go do something. And speaking of the services, we got to get serious about who's going to lead this effort. I think the discussion up in the building right now is that whoever that lead designation is, I don't think that's been signed yet. I don't know. Is it OSD policy? Is it a combat commander? Is it somebody else? I don't know where it's at right now, but my opinion is, and I talked about this before, so I will rehash a little bit. This cannot be done by committee, and it can't be done from the Pentagon. OSD policy is not the right entity to do this. And I go back to my example about NC3. Couldn't be done at the building. Secretary Mattis told General Hyten, I want a commander to be able to take this on. Hyten, I want you to do it. General Hyten got the authorities and he got some resources from OSD to do that. And so that's why STRATCOM ended up with NC3 and the NEC. The same thing has to happen here. We need to designate a field commander. I think it should be NORTHCOM, probably delegated down to a 3-star commander. And then for the operations side of this, and then we should have the acquisition, lead on this. Imagine if the Department of Defense had an agency responsible for missile defense. They'd probably be a pretty logical choice to do this. Oh, wait, we have the Missile Defense Agency. Maybe they ought to be in charge of the acquisition side of this. And imagine if we had an operational command out there that had responsibility for the function of missile defense. Oh, wait, the Joint Functional Component Command for Integrated Missile Defense. We actually have a 3-star with a joint staff that does a lot of support to all the COCOM, supports NORTHCOM, supports STRATCOM, supports SpaceCom. Oh, imagine in the UCP if we had language that designated a COCOM responsible for missile defense. Oh, gee, we don't even have to rewrite that because Space Command has responsibility for missile defense. It switched over from STRATCOM to SpaceCom in the last UCP. Maybe the UCP has to look at addressing this mission a little bit more fulsomely too. So that's part of the prioritized discussion. Then the next one is position. So how do we posture ourselves to get after Golden Dome for America? Well, I think you got to take into account the two main things: the threats, and the executive order clearly enumerates what the threats are: ballistic missiles, hypersonics, advanced cruise missiles, and then advanced aerial threats. Not sure what advanced aerial threats are. I'd take that as maybe anything from a counter UAS to maybe a rogue aircraft. That's what the threats are. But where are the threats coming from? What are their launch vehicles? Are they coming out of silos, off of tails? Are they coming off of aircraft? Then when we take what the threat is, then we got to look at then, well, what are those assets that are going to be attacked? What are those counter value assets? What is that second strike capability? And again, that the executive order tells us that we need to defend, that these threats are going to come after. And then how do we now position to defend all those assets against those threats, which then leads into the last part, which is now posture. And posture gets into the nuts and bolts of what are the systems that are out there? What are the systems out there? Everything from space-based sensors to space-based interceptors to HBTSS to holding track custody to mid-course capabilities down to the underlayer. And then are they full-time? Are they always there 24/7 as watchstanders? Do we take Aegis BMD, take them away from the fleet and put them on the periphery of the U.S., steam them down the St. Lawrence Seaway and put them in the Great Lakes so that they can take out cruise missiles that might come over in some sort of polar approach? I don't know, but we have to look at the posture. Do we take THAAD and do we take Tippy-2s? Do we take some of these legacy systems, which I don't think legacy is such a bad word. JD might disagree with me a little bit. The legacy systems are what we have for Epic 1 and probably for a good portion of Epic 2. And so we've got to take a look at what our legacy system can do so that we have some capability available to us now while we're innovating and developing other capabilities that come down that are going to come down the pipe. And so in that posture, and then also in that posture, so are they permanent or do we just do demonstrations? And that's where the innovation comes, is we do some operational demonstrations of capability around the US. I don't care if we do live fires off the West Coast, maybe some of the innovation is let's have the fireworks barge of ICBM targets where we can just launch one up, think like a sounding rocket or something. We launch something up and we get a rudimentary capability for a space-based interceptor on this fireworks barge of targets that we could provide. Again, pretty rudimentary. The engineers out there will crucify me for it, but that's the way that we've got to be thinking so we can do these operational demonstrations, show some capability, and then in Epic 2, 3, and 4, we start to scale it into what we need for our defense. So that's kind of that's kind of my 3 Ps, if you will. So posture, position, or priority, position, and posture to help us get after Golden Dome for America across the epics.
Thank you, Dan. 100% agree with you on the priority aspect of it and the roles and responsibility mission. But can this architecture in 25 days or in 60 days properly address that? Or are they not going to address it? From your perspective, if they don't address it, this thing doesn't go anywhere. So is that going to be rejected or not? Or how do we get that damn thing to where what you said in those priorities are done correctly to be able to field this type of system?
I would assert that if you give the mission to an operational commander and he or she leverages their staff, they can come up with what the operational architecture would look like and then what the systems are that are going to lay in on top of that operational architecture. I would assert that. We do it already. The COCOMs already do it all over the world.
That's not assigned right now.
I don't know where it is, Ricky. So yeah, that's the point. I don't know where it's at. I don't know where it's at. It hasn't been designated yet as far as I know. I'm not in the know as much as other folks are, but I haven't seen any headlines. The only headline we saw was we renamed it Iron Dome to Golden Dome. That's what made the headline.
And that could be part of this architect, could be part of the submission, that or not. And then one more thing from your perspective, from your expertise as the Army Space Missile Defense Commander, what do you think we can get up in 2 years, in 18 months, in space? I know I got all the stuff on ground, but from you, you've seen it all. What can we get up there legitimately, reality-wise, to get up in 2 years?
Yeah, I don't think it's unreasonable to think that we could get a space-based intercept test in 2 years.
Test or demo or
test demo, I would call it, some sort of, I wouldn't take it so far as to say it's an operational demo, but to get a demonstration, I think we could do that in 2 years, but it goes back to number 1, which is the prioritization. We have to lay in the priority here to make sure that everybody understands it's important.
And that's spending that big money for that. That's big money, right? Out of that budget that they're going to give us, that's going to go for those quote legacy systems, that's going to be a big part of that priority to do something like what you're talking about, correct?
Yeah, so it's a balance, right? So you got your RDT&E funding that's going to go towards that, but then you have your operational funding, and maybe as we're bringing folks back, and maybe as we start to reduce our overseas deployed footprint, we start bringing folks back and using that money, that O&M money to do deployments or demonstrations, or frankly, fixed site missions for air missile defense, again in support of Golden Dome for America forces.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Thank you very much for your discussion. Next, we'll go into Shotgun, Tom Browning, that was acting Secretary of Assistant Secretary Adasny, I believe, at R&E. So he's seen a lot of movement with capabilities, new capabilities, developing new capabilities to do it. And we are honored to have you here, Shotgun, to give us a process of how quick we can do this and what the reality is of what we can do. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Ricky. Hey, I really appreciate the invite to be part of this. I don't know that I'll answer your question right up front because I'm going to go on a little bit of a diatribe first. But welcome to me. You're used to it. Hey, back in 2018, we had a real problem nationwide, and that was how do we go about deterring the big bad countries from coming after us? We were worried about losing our ability to deter them, and the government set up something called Assault Breaker 2. I had the opportunity to stand that up. And there were a lot of really interesting lessons learned from that I want to walk through because I think it'll help frame the how you approach this. And I'll tell you, it's funny. In 2021, I had the opportunity to brief Congress, and one of the representatives at the end of it, one of his questions to me was, "What should Assault Breaker 3 be?" And I said, "The next biggest problem we need to approach is homeland defense, specifically air and missile defense," and that was in 2019. And what's important is we and I will say this absolutely categorically, and people can argue with me, we don't do joint. We still don't do joint. We do a collaboration among services, and that the ability to address multi-domain, multi-service problems is an area where the DoD is just abysmally broken. And we found that out in AB2. So when we stood up AB2, a couple things that I think were really important. First one was it was hand-picked, purpose-built people. So we picked the absolute best people, put them together regardless of organization as a single team, and that was their full-time job. You're not going to solve this with once a week Pentagon VTCs, and that's what we're doing right now. You need people who that is all they do for a living. Number two, it needs to be all service, all domain. Those are two very different things, and all security level, meaning no closed doors to those who are part of this. And you know, Ricky, I brought this up earlier, but security is a big part of this. We do want to be opaque to our adversaries, so having security is really important. The problem is we've taken that to a level where we're not willing to tell the good guys what we know. And when you say, what can I do in the next 18 months, 100% of that is technically interesting is going to be classified. And unless we can work in a classified environment and fully exploit and take everybody on that team and not allow a single person in the DoD to hide, quote, a secret from them, whether that's intel or technology, is a really critical point. You've got to trust these people with every bit of information we have. So again, all service, all domain, all security. The third one is stuff ain't a capability. Capability, and I got to give credit, Dr. Jim Galambos came up with a concept that he called his rubric. And he said every kill chain, every kill web can be composed of 6 things. You have a foundation of battle management, command and control, communications, and position, navigation, and timing. Everything needs that. And then for every kill chain, it's selective sensors, platforms, and weapons that you plug into that network in order to create that kill chain. So a missile is not a kill chain, a sensor is not a kill chain. All of those have to be put together. And the whole CJAD C2 world sprang from this need for that foundation, a purple joint foundation of battle management, command control, comms, and position, navigation, and timing. And we have failed over the last 4 years to make any real progress in that area. And that is a really big part of this. So for this to work, you need that comprehensive integration of battle management, command control, comms, PNT, and then the sensors, platforms, and weapons, regardless of service, and also regardless of kinetic or non-kinetic. All of that's got to be tied together. The third one is when you're trying to decide what stuff you need and what stuff you can afford. We came up with a term that I love, and we call it the triumvirate. And JD's heard me say that a billion times. but it's this idea of there are kind of three big knobs: technology, operational need, and your resources. So anything that you're going to take on like this, the technologist, the operator, and the acquirer have to work as a single team. They can't be peer competitors. You can't throw it over the fence at each other. I've got to deal with what is technically feasible, what is operationally necessary, and what is fiscally reasonable. And all of those three things are variables that need to work together. And when you work those independently, so if you have R&E dream up stuff and throw that to A&S, it just does not work. And then you've heard this a couple times, but I had a theory in R&E, and that is the first one sucks. And it doesn't matter what you build, but that first version of what you build is going to suck. And in DoD, we try to make that not happen, and it's irrational. So we try to create that Six Sigma perfect thing, and what it gives you is MDAA answers, and it gives you these multi-year programs before we ever get the very first idea of a prototype out the door in an operational prototype. And I think DARPA does it about as good as one can ask, as far as going from an idea to competition amongst industry to getting something out the door. And I tell you, DARPA does not create hardware things in 18 months. So this idea of doing new things in 18 months, I actually don't think is rational. I think there are ways we can combine existing things. And that's kind of my final point. If there was one thing that I beat the drum the most in R&E that I think DoD has lost is the art of experimentation. And that is, being willing to fail, putting the operators, and absolutely, as Dan said, getting the operators out there and entrusting them and giving them the toys. But again, they've got to work hand in hand with those technologists so that we can find out that first one sucks, and then get 1.1 out the door, 1.2 out the door, 2.0 out the door as rapidly as possible. So this idea of operational and technological experimentation hand in hand is a necessary way of allowing you to put that iPhone 1 in the field, understanding that that's not the right answer, and I'm going to build my way forward. So to me, the most important first step is to do that Assault Breaker 3 concept of picking the right mix of operational talent, of technical talent, and that includes industry and acquisition talent. Putting them together, giving them the reins. And then the final one, I'll kind of end on a bit of a downer, and then I'll shut up, at least on this part. And that is within about 8 months, we had a string of recommendations that we pitched to the Joint Requirements Oversight Council. 100% of our recommendations that were technically feasible and executable today, back in 2019, were accepted by the JROC. But what does that mean? They're the requirements people. Everything was considered technically feasible, considered needed, and we ran into the next day, the best you're going to do is talk about resourcing that in 18 months. So you're talking about, POM next is the first time you're going to talk about paying for it. So until we can figure out ways of applying current year resources to current year problems, then all we're doing is dreaming up plans that require 18 to 24 months before I get the first nickel. All right, off the soapbox.
Wow. Thanks, Shotgun. And I think you hit the point, because the stuff that's already being developed, whether what Dan said, left of launch, or top secret stuff, is going to be possibly the bulk of this. You can't tell the public, but that seems to be considerable. But even if that is true, your Rubicon's not working here, because you don't have the ability to break through all that acquisition process. We're seeing what so how do you do this? Do you get another president order or executive order to change this, or just hand select, like Dan said, one component commander? But I don't think that's his job to oversee an acquisition thing. This seems like
here's
revolution.
And JD and I were actually partners on this a couple years ago, and this got a little bit goofy with the last administration. But the thing I wanted to try, and this touches a little bit in line with something Dan brought up, and that is the idea of standing up a joint task force. And for the NORTHCOM idea, likely it needs to be interagency. But what I want is an operational commander who is put in charge of the problem. But when I say put in charge, I'm saying give them the technological, so they have their mini R&E, they have their mini A&S, they have their mini operators. So this is putting an operational commander in charge of the technical side, the operational side, and the acquisition side, and giving them current year resources that they can spend. And it's funny because we pushed the idea on the Hill, frankly, while I was at DARPA, we pushed this idea of a JTF for INDOPACOM, very specifically focused on integrating across that rubric complete and comprehensive all service kill chains. And it actually got all the way as far as DepSecDef, and DepSecDef shot it down because she said, I don't need Congress to tell me how to staff my organizations. And it kind of fizzled. But this idea to me of standing up a joint task force under an empowered and responsible commander, military commander, is the right way of making this happen.
You think that's going to happen? You think we're going to make that happen now?
I would love it if it happened. You tell me. No, and Riki, like I said, King for a day, what I would do is start, and I wouldn't call it Assault Breaker, but I would stand up Assault Breaker 3 tomorrow. What we did was frigging amazing. What we are still doing in Assault Breaker 2 is amazing. And you get the right minds together and you knock down all the security walls. And it really is stunning. And by the way, the services, every single service have members from Assault Breaker 2 since day one. And you've got to have the services in bed with you as part of the team.
Okay. Thank you, Shotgun. Great discussion. Okay, Mark from Taiwan, our board member, Mark Montgomery. Mark.
Hey, thank you, Riki. It's good to be here. And the three guys before me have really said a lot of good stuff. So I want to take it, want to try to limit my my comments to things that they hadn't mentioned already. And I attach myself to a lot of what I've heard so far. I can't always attach myself to what JD says, because about a third of the stuff he says, I'm not sure I understand. But the two, for me, the two big concepts are, and I think Dan got at this pretty well. There's what you can do now, and there's what you can do in the future. And you need to recognize there's two different things. You need to make sure you fund those two. I mean, my biggest fear is that there's these existing programs. There's, representatives, senators who really like existing programs because they're built in districts they're in, or they're fielded in districts they're in. And they tend to focus on those because those are tangible things they can get at right away. And there's apparently money, to be shoveled. And so there's a extreme desire to do that. I think we have to be very, I think the department's going to have to be very explicit and pointed in its effort to say, we're going to do these things in the short to midterm to get a minimum capability, missile defense capability up in the air, and then, in the field. And then we're going to invest in the long term so that the long-term solution is properly fielded. And maybe it's 7, 8 years from now, with some of the delays it could on some of the programs, they may not evidence themselves for 10 years. But the most important thing, and people go, oh my God, Mark, the president says do it now. Well, my answer is, when you ignore a problem for 20 years, that watching your enemy develop an increasingly capable conventional strike capability at greater and greater and greater ranges, and then eventually you find that it's on your front door, because between a mix of cruise and hypersonic missiles, and they can do this, you cannot fix it in 1 or 2 years. It's going to take time. So when I look at it, the short to midterm are systems that exist, systems that if I went to a company and said, build this, they actually have a proven program that can be either restarted or juiced up to produce more things. And to me, it's the first thing is acknowledge we do have some space-based sensors, whether it's SDA system or MDA's hypersonic and ballistic tracking space system. There are existing systems beginning to be populated in space. And those are going to be important sensors, and they're going to be the backbone of your 10 years from now program, but they can be part of your current efforts. And then I would I would recognize I'm going to develop an extremely limited counterforce. When you think about counter value versus counterforce deterrent system. In other words, I'm going to defend my defended asset list is going to look a lot like a list of military bases, strategic warfighters really care about. And with that, I'm going to protect through legacy systems. I don't know, I think Tom mentioned it before we got on the air. I'm a big believer. I think one of them will be a J-lens type system. It doesn't have to be J-lens, but some dirigible based system with a fire and quality track radar on it. Why? It gives me the range and the mobility, that if I decide this is the area that I'm concerned about, I can over time, over a period, not this isn't this is more in the old transportable, not mobile kind of framework, move it. Now look, if the aerostat or dirigible ends up being one that is not tied to a to cabling, then potentially it could be one that is mobile, not transportable. But I'm not going to pick a fight on that. Just get that moving. And there's some option for persistent drones with unique sensors in them that could amplify this. But this is all about increasing the battle space that you can surveil into the thousands of miles, vice hundreds of miles that you get with a lot of ground-based radars. And then I think that this could involve Mark 41 VLS, which is now capable of both Army and Navy missiles that can be put inside them. And then you're going to have to buy more effectors, more missiles, but that would be very tempered here. Ground-based missiles doing a lot of, we're talking about cruise missile defense, they're reasonable cost. By reasonable cost, I mean an unreasonable $2 or $3 million. But if they're hypersonic and ballistic, the entering argument on most of these systems is closing in on $20 million a shot now. So I'd be very deliberate in the number of weapons I pick for that. And look, if we need some Aegis Ashore-like installations, whether they're repurposed, retiring Aegis ships or something else, those might be some of the answers. I would not put existing ships with full complements of crew on patrol for this. The cost of that, per unit is kind of jaw-dropping in its O&M cost each year dedicated to that mission. Plus, I think we're at the point where we already have a Navy that's short on the number of ships it has for traditional maritime missions, which mean going away from our shores. But we can figure that out. But the whole process here is it is an extremely limited initial effort at a counter force targeting. And so the defended asset list, small. That's if you want a stupid euphemism, and apparently on a bipartisan basis, administrations like stupid euphemisms. This one's like Bronze Dome. I mean, you're glad you're on the platform, but you're pretty sure you didn't win. Then you go down and you think about the long term, Riki. And I think this is where, and Tom's referred to it, JD's referred to it, Dan's referred to it. We need to focus, I think, a lot on space there. And part of it is I want this. The reason I don't mind like some kind of formal review as part of this is we need to say out loud what I think everyone on this panel knows and says quietly, which is that we're going to weaponize space. And we're not going to weaponize it with nuclear weapons. We're not going to break any laws, but we're eventually going to weaponize space. We're going to put weapons that fly in and through space to strike inbound targets. I think over time, not initially, but over time, this drives down the cost per intercept that you're going to experience, and I think space-based engagements are the way forward on this. But it's not something that's going to happen in less than 7 to 10 years, and therefore I'm trying to be realistic. Now, when you get to that system, it can be counter force and counter targeting or counter value. I'm sorry. You can begin to have a defended asset list that looks a lot like your critical asset list. And you can begin to have a robust defense of the homeland. But in none of these things did I say, take and build large land-based radars that you jam geographically around the United States. I just don't think that's the investment we need long-term. And while it locks in votes of Northeast, Southeast senators and things like that, I think it does not serve us well in getting a plan out the door. And, in this one, it can be a silver dome, it can be an iron dome. It really depends how well the Missile Defense Agency is at planning this, and the Defense Industrial Base is in developing it, and then the services are in fielding it. But if all three of those are done properly, with people doing the assigned tasking they have, then I think we really can get to the unfortunate name of Golden Dome. That's what I had, Riki.
Thanks, Mark. Hey, what's the balance percentage that you would put for the current capability and the future capability, including left of launch, including the secret programs. What is that? What's that? Is it 50-50? Is it 30-70? What is that you think is going to?
You're asking balance short term versus long term in this?
Yes, yes.
You know, unfortunately, because of the cost of effector, it's going to be higher than I want it to be. But it should be like, in a perfect world, like 30-70. It's going to be closer to 50-50.
Because
these things eat up money. I mean, they just eat up money, and there will be some politics associated with this as it maneuvers its way through Congress.
And you know, we've had a couple of these virtuals here. I mean, is the process that we're seeing, is that going to work? It doesn't. It seems that we're still, you know, going down the same road.
There's such
what does it take to break this, to do it? Is it?
There's such a want it bad, get it bad here. We do have to be careful. Look, you know, you can't by the power and will of the Secretary of Defense or President make engineers, you know, crunch numbers faster, right? I mean, I don't know if they use abacuses or calculators, or they use an MDAA these days. You know, it takes time, and you want a professional job done. You want it QA'd. If you would like to see the example of want it bad, get it bad, and F it up, I point you to the tropical island of Guam, which has you know what, for its defense right now after 5 years, or 4 years, I'm sorry, and you know, a couple $2 billion. And I do not blame services for this, other than the Navy, for not stepping up when they should have.
Well, how do we stop that path going that way now?
I think that take the time to do it right. Make sure you've got a good plan before you hit execute. Use the Missile Defense Agency, the agency you built and manned with engineers, to design this thing and do it. Now, look, there's other work going to go on. I recognize when I say a lot of this is in space, there's a Space Defense Agency as well. There's other players like DARPA. I'm not saying they're not really important in this, but I think, you know, if I'm worried about a rush plan. I know Missile Defense Agency was thinking about this ahead of executive order and working on it. But even that extra time, I'm not sure is right. I mean, look, it shouldn't take us 15 years to build like a next generation fighter, but it seems to. I'm not saying this is a 15-year thing, but I'm saying there is some wise time spent in your initial development efforts, and we should be careful. We should be respectful of the time. So I mean, this is something that should have been measured in quarters, not months, probably, the initial design element. And I think, or months, not days, you know, whatever analogy you want to make. And I just think we have to be very careful with this and make sure that we've got the right answer.
I'd like to open this up to the rest of you in this discussion right now. If you want to chip in on what we're just talking about with Mark, Shotgun Dan, and JD, thoughts?
Hey, Shotgun, you brought back some good memories about the relationship between the operational manager, the technical manager, and the resource manager. What we found in that journey was that the operations people are significant in understanding that interface to the technology. And then it's up to the technology folks to go out there and find those advanced concepts, conduct some type of initial filter for feasibility, and then make it work into the construct. And of course, the resource guys are like, nah, bro, that's not going to work. The good news is we have a ton of 2-year OTA type money floating around out there. To Admiral Montgomery's point, we can go out and we can burn some near-term money to start putting this stuff together. And one of the major lessons learned from the Guam defense system is let's not wait to pursue the integration to the very end. All right, let's not start picking out our sensors and our effectors right now and then trying to make it work. We do that, it's going to look like the North Shore food truck community, right? A little bit of everything with no intent and purpose behind it. So there are some lessons learned from decisions that were made that we should apply to this.
Yeah, just two other thoughts. One is our allies and partners are not sitting on their thumbs either. And you know, Rick, you and I have dealt with a lot of brilliant ideas from allies and partners. So I think looking beyond the shores of the U.S. with respect to current state of the art and technical capability and things that are frankly already fielded is probably value added. Goes without saying that if you want to look at the state of the art for missile defense, look at the coast of China. So you know that I think if you follow the MDAA path, that's what you're looking at. I mean, that is what it was built for. One comment on MDAA, you know, the organizational names are just names. You know, so something that we do really badly in the Department of Defense is when an organization doesn't live up to what they're doing, we stand up other organizations, you know, thus the birth of DIU, thus the birth of CDAO. You know, we always want to build a new organization. So I love the idea of making missile defense do missile defense. However, I think you need some really significant changes to how they do business to make that work. And then just one final thought, and that is, I get scared when we take individual portions, and you know, missile defense. I was at NORAD for the better part of 3 years, and it is key and essential, but it's just part of the big picture. You know, you are defending against missiles because something else is happening. So breaking it off as its own thing, independent of an integrated fight, I think is a mistake. And again, going back to that idea of assault breaker too, of looking at this as an all-domain. You know, where missile defense is just that first part of an integrated concept ends up being really important. So you can't, I don't think you want to bifurcate it off as its own. And to me, that was a big problem with the Guam defense is we had the command and control for Guam defense and the command and control for INDOPACOM, and they were being built as two unique and completely different things, which is just crazily stupid.
I'd add the MDAB probably needs to be relooked. I think that in the MDAB, you know, it's headed up by acquisition. And frankly, the vice chairman, I think if I remember by charter, the vice chairman is supposed to sit the MDAB, delegate it down to the STRATCOM commander or SpaceCom commander. I would assert that maybe it's time for the MDAB to be retooled and called the Golden Dome for America DEB or something. And so we can focus on this executive order and have equal seats there for the operational side and the acquisition side. And maybe it's the MDA director, or maybe it's the Golden Dome for America commander. And then they get the appropriate oversight from the vice chairman and ANS or R&E. But let them run. And then if they have RFIs, or they need support, or they need policy decisions or whatever, then they can run it up the flagpole. But I would just, part of the reason that we haven't been very effective is the MDAB hasn't been very effective. It doesn't produce very much. So I think we should probably look at the MDAB over.
Any thought on that, Mark or JD? Tom?
You know, as we begin to develop, as this thing pushes through once you have a plan, I do think you're going to need some kind of governing board this is a lot of moving pieces on a presidential, a presidential initiative. A Secretary of Defense and Deputy Secretary of Defense that want to maintain their jobs should be pushing for some kind of executive oversight. And look, the skills for doing this oversight don't sit. I think we've had some deputy secretaries who think they and their immediate staff can serve as that kind of oversight. And while they are smart people and they know the president's intent, they're not actually equipped to serve that same, that kind of oversight role because they have day-to-day, they have so many other number one priorities being executed. I think one of the things that killed us on defense of Guam was maintaining the control at this high level, and then wondering, why that wasn't providing the kind of persistent oversight and guidance to prevent a cluster. So yeah, I don't know if it's called the MDAB. I don't know if it has that's a good name, but I don't know if it has the governing business rules of the last MDAB, but or the traditional one. But I do think some kind of for this kind of thing, if it's going to really get 25% of our reconciliation bump, the money that's coming in reconciliation, that extra cash, it deserves that kind of oversight.
Thanks, Mark. Hey, JD, can you open it up for questions? You're going to do Q&A. and ask.
Yeah, we have a few of them right now. Some that we already hit on, the governance piece, the realistic of sensors and effectors combination. Somebody asked about the role of Air Force's new C3BM initiatives, which shotgun check my fire, but I think they're adopting JFN, which is the evolution of. So I think General Crosby's onto something there. Taking advantage of that stuff. So that should help with some of the architecture. Here's one. I'm Montgomery. I'll throw it over to you. Is as it's rolled out, what are the plans to deal with high capable but low density systems and being able to evolve that into something more attainable to include attritable unmanned platforms?
Yeah, later on, I'm gonna pull some chemicals together and cook up some gold in my bathtub. I mean, you got to be careful saying I'm gonna transition high cost, low density things into into high density, low cost things. Look, first, I want to attach myself to what Tom said about look for what international partners are doing. So every once in a while they hit gold, and they come up with good systems at a lower cost than us. Not always, and sometimes they're a little bit of snake oil. But that'd be number one. Number two, I do think effectors are going to cost us money. I don't think ground-based effectors to get the speed and range and then have the quality of intercept that you need, that stuff costs money. I mean, I don't know how you avoid that totally. I do think on the sensors, there's a reason we went to space-based sensors. There's a reason I like near space or raised altitude sensors. I would go for those a little bit. But I don't think you're going to get. The short answer is be very careful for anyone who says my idea is the best idea because I have reversed the engine, the cost curve magically, and I've found you that solution.
Any other panelists want to jump on that as well from their perspective?
I just think that AJ, I think that left to launch is a key element of this, right? So you're not spending expensive interceptors. The easiest time to hit a missile is while it's still on the ground. So in policy decisions, though they assume some risk, they don't cost very much money. They're policy decisions, which just in and of themselves can have a deterrent value to our adversary. And then, let some of our COCOMs, let some of our global combat commanders help solve some of the left to launch challenges that we might have, whether it's targeting or whether it's, actually taking action.
Hey, JD, one quick thought, and this is only tangential to the question, but we really haven't touched on it. But there are two technical areas where what I would say is we have an amazing string of laboratory technical successes and never get it out the door. So this goes a little bit back to my concept of the first one sucks, but directed energy, we have evolved technically to the point where it is a very feasible tool. The problem is there's a lot of warts, so we end up always staggering and not putting it in the field. And getting DE in the field, whether that's electronic or laser, both from a technical standpoint are wildly there with respect to usability. I believe that we are there with respect to, again, technical feasibility in space-based sensing. And then the final one that we really haven't brought up, but and whether this is left of launch or right of launch, cyber, we're in love with kind of on-network hacker cyber ops, but what I call off-net, meaning using, countering adversary technical capabilities through cyber means. There are many really amazing, again, technical success stories out there that just haven't found their way into operational capability. So on both directed energy and cyber, there is a lot of opportunity that we just are not turning into gold in the bathtub.
Hey, JD, I just want to, because Mark's going to have to go pretty quick, but in my visit to NATO last week, there's concern policy-wise that's going to become Fortress America and assure deterrence with our Golden Dome. And that narrative needs to be pushed out, because I think when you do space, it's global. I mean, all that stuff moves around, and that approach to be able to assure that missile defense, what we're doing in the Golden Dome, is to assure their deterrence needs to be thought through, and policy needs to follow that. And I honestly think that there's going to be, the president's going to do a Reagan speech to justify the money that he's got to spend on this. Once that architecture is approved, that's going to come. But that narrative of what you do when you weaponize space has got to be addressed correctly for the entire world on what we're doing. And is that a deterrent? Is that part of the deterrent against China and Russia, that we're going to do this? And it's not singular, it connects, like the offset, it connects to our offensive strike capability. So we are enhancing our deterrent in a pretty short, because the kind of money we're spending is the same money we're spending as we redo our ICBMs, as we redo our bombers. It's that we got to play at this level. If we're going to get this type of money, you're going to have to play and integrate. And that's something we've never been able to do very well. We tried it in '83 and it didn't pan out. Any thoughts on that?
Hey, JD, you're required to talk as the junior guy.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. But yes, as INDOPACOM with the most treaty allies in the area AOR, no, it definitely translates. So I have heard the concern that is this going to allow not PACOM, but it's going to allow the United States to pull resources back to CONUS and focus on CONUS-based defense more so than protect the national interest forward and abroad, right? The United States Navy's role is to protect interest forward and abroad, not the Thomas Jefferson approach of we're going to protect the homeland. So that has come up, and they're worried about, well, how much capability are you going to pull back to be able to support this? So that's, now we're bringing in the combatant commanders for assurance. Like, no, hold on, that this is going to be not a unique, but this is going to be a conglomeration of a bunch of different capabilities that are going to be focused on homeland defense, not to take away of our mechanisms to support deterrence forward.
Yeah, but also recall that in the EO, it does address enabling our allies and partners, though, too, for their missile defense capabilities. So though we may pull assets back, the fact that we can provide them with either capability, intel, communications, network support, what have you, sharing data, always a big thing with our allies and partners. I think that helps buttress any of the concerns that the allies might have if we do pull some capability back.
As far as questions, Rick, that's about it.
Okay.
Turn over to closing comments.
Yeah, let's just close it up. Just go around and just close it up real quick. It's been a great session. Thank you, each of you, for contributing to the thoughts. Shotgun?
Sorry, Mike buffoonery. No, hey, I think we covered kind of the spectrum. Again, if I had one, one parting thought is this idea of actually empowering a select group of people, which we have not done, to get together, cross-section of operators, technologists, and those that are fiscally aware. And I agree, you need policy in there as well. Again, we did all of that. The original AB2 team was about 75 people across DoD and the IC, and that's probably about the right number. But standing up a focused team that is empowered and informed to do this has to be the first step, and they're not doing that right now. Anyway, that's probably my last thoughts.
Thank you, Shaq. All right, JD.
No, I think we covered all. This is a good one. Thanks, General.
Okay. Dan? Yeah.
Hey, thanks, Ricky. Unlike the guy who won Best Actor last night, I'm not going to take 20 minutes of time up for everybody. But The construct that I laid out, prioritize position and posture, I think goes a long way towards really helping us, from the strategic down to the tactical, and from the here right now Epic 1, helping us build out to Epic 4. So, but thanks for hosting and teeing this up for us to discuss, Riki.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan. Hey, it was a great discussion. We're halfway through the executive order, and these thoughts need to be put out so they can understand it, because the worst thing that can happen is that thing gets rejected because it's going down a path as we discussed today to be able to. So these recommendations are phenomenal. It's a great way to get that out so we can do the best we can for the nation and for the world on it. So thank you, each of you, for taking the time today to present your views. Thank you.